you. Just don't get pregnant. I heard this from my parents, counselors, and teachers more times than I can count. They would emphasize that I had a bright future ahead of me just as long as I could graduate without getting pregnant. At 17 years old, it seemed odd to me that I was told one of my greatest barriers to getting to college was avoiding pregnancy. I sat in a small classroom on the south side of Milwaukee as a high school senior in my sexual health education class, and the message was overwhelmingly, just don't get pregnant. While I understand this goal, I remember sitting there with my friend who was already 6 months pregnant at the time, and I knew 4 other students who were younger than me and already pregnant. I thought of the reasons that unintended pregnancy was so common in my predominantly Latinx community, including a lack of education, cultural norms, and a lack of resources. This experience stuck with me. It seemed unfair that I was considered one of the lucky ones just because I graduated without getting pregnant. This was my first exposure to the field of sexual health education, but I quickly realized that the issue was much larger than just my community. My sex ed experience demonstrated the scare tactics, lack of inclusivity, and harmful culture regarding sexuality that is prevalent in our country. The reality is that our country is failing to provide sexual health education, and it is our duty to do something about this. Flash forward to the summer of 2022, I received the Circumnavigator's Travel Study Grant, which allowed me the opportunity to travel the world and study sexual health education globally. I circumnavigated the globe through Argentina, Ireland, England, France, and Singapore. While each country provided valuable information about the state of reproductive rights, I will never forget when I stepped into the sex ed classroom in France. I arrived in Paris and I visited an organization called Crips Île-de-France. I entered the bright space to find bean bags, condom demonstrators of all colors and sizes, and posters along every wall. The posters ranged from information about menstruation to the gender unicorn, an educational tool that teaches students about gender and sexuality identities. A large pride flag with the organization's logo hung in the window facing the street. Colorful books and pamphlets were available for students to take. Large jars of internal and external condoms sat on the front counter available for free. Around the corner, there was a social worker available for healthcare referrals and support. 2 friendly health educators, Chloe and Estella, were at the front of the room to welcome me and ready to help. It was a stark contrast from any kind of sex ed classroom I had ever seen before. It was skills-based, comprehensive, inclusive, and legally required. Sexual health education courses in the United States typically revolve around lectures. The teacher stands in front of the room for about 45 minutes or so, going on and on about everything that students should not do. There are currently 19 states with abstinence-only policies in place. This means that students are only taught how to avoid sexual behavior and the associated risk. Students are taught to be afraid, disempowered, and uneducated. There is a foundational difference to sexual health education in France. Crips Île-de-France approaches sex ed by teaching students all information, including abstinence, and teaching skills and abilities to reinforce the ability to make the right decisions for themselves. In their curriculum, I saw examples of games and debates that were not only far more interesting and engaging, but they teach students how to think for themselves, a skill that they will need for life far beyond sexual health. I participated in a debate-style game where the facilitator reads a statement off of a card, something like it's healthy to read your partner's text messages, and then students sort themselves into agree, disagree, or neutral. Students can vote any way that they would like, but they have to be able to explain why they voted the way that they did. While they occasionally step in to provide factual information, Estella shared that they find youth are very familiar with these topics because of social media and their friends. So it's more about hearing what they think or know and building off of that. Crips Ile-de-France emphasize that they need less lectures and presentations, but more about skills and abilities to make informed decisions and the opportunity to practice doing so. We have to educate our youth to become prepared adults that can make responsible decisions for themselves. We have to empower them to think critically and engage in safer behaviors because they choose to, not because they were bullied or afraid. Just don't get pregnant. Many people believe that this is the only goal of sexual health education, preventing pregnancy. However, our work is not done when pregnancy is prevented. What about consent? What about gender and sexuality? What about building healthy relationships? Sex ed is so much more. It should be comprehensive. While sex ed classrooms should be a space to discuss preventing pregnancy, they should also be a place where students can gain factual information about their own bodies, have respectful identity exploration, learn how to build healthy relationships, and a space that promotes safer sex-positive behaviors. Crips Ile-de-France emphasize their approach of teaching these topics because students will inevitably encounter these issues throughout their lives. For instance, they teach about healthy relationships content to ensure that students can establish boundaries and demonstrate healthy communication styles with their friends, families, and romantic partners someday. They are taught with and understand the mentality that pregnancy is not the only focus or result of sexual health. Consent, pleasure, and safety are all important factors. We have to empower our youth to navigate these complex topics as young people to ensure that they can continue to do so for the rest of their lives. Beyond teaching all topics, another component of comprehensive sexual health education is inclusivity. While reproductive rights are under attack around this country, LGBTQ+ rights are as well. We have outrageous legislation in some states that wants to ban the ability for educators to discuss anything related to gender and sexuality education. Other policies want to limit the ability of our youth to express themselves, live freely, and instead want to police which bathrooms they use and which sports teams they can play on. Across 23 states, over 150 anti-LGBTQ+ policies have been introduced this year alone. It is ridiculous, and it is dangerous for the over 3.2 million LGBTQ+ youth in our country. They deserve to see themselves represented in our curriculum, and they deserve access to relevant, medically accurate information just as much as any other student. When I discussed the political climate surrounding LGBTQ+ rights with the Crips Ile-de-France staff, they were shocked. Sexual health education has a more inclusive lens to them, and they teach LGBTQ+ inclusive sexual health education. They do this by creating supportive environments such as by hanging pride flags, but most importantly, they provide medically accurate information about how students engaging in all kinds of sexual behavior can know their options and understand their risk. For instance, in America, we are often taught that sex assigned at birth is binary. This means that when a baby is born, the doctor or midwife looks at the child and decides if they are a boy or a girl. This completely ignores the 1.7% of the population that is born intersex. Intersex is an umbrella term used to refer to people who are born with different anatomy or traits that fall outside of strictly male or female. To be born intersex is as common as being born with red hair, and yet they are often left out of our curriculums and our discussions. I visited France during their month of intersex awareness and education. They had the flag of the community in the classroom, and they highlighted the various events they had planned about specific issues facing the intersex community. Similarly, Crips Ile-de-France uses various examples of relationship structures and identities throughout their curriculum. When they talk about family structures, they include examples where a student has one mom or two dads. When they talk about forms of prevention, they include PrEP as a form of HIV prevention, specifically for gay couples, where preventing pregnancy is not the only focus or goal. Comprehensive sex ed is inclusive sex ed, and we can reach far more students when we teach this type of education. We are excluding a large portion of our students when we choose to focus on cisgender, heteronormative sexual health education. Finally, the most drastic difference between our two systems is the legal aspect. Only 28 states mandate sexual health education. Even if it is mandated, the quantity and quality are heavily state and school district dependent. On the contrary, in France, all school-age children are required to receive sexual health education. Because of this policy, students expect to receive this information, and parents and guardians demonstrate much greater support. As a result, parent pushback is nearly non-existent, even with LGBTQ+ inclusive topics. The legal requirement reinforces the importance of this education. It places sex ed alongside science, mathematics, and social studies because it is valued. It perpetuates the idea that sex ed is essential for the well-being of youth. Countries like France with sex-positive policies have consistently demonstrated more positive sexual health outcomes compared to sex-negative nations like the United States. Most importantly, the legal requirement deconstructs the stigma surrounding sexual health. Ideas that sexual health is uncomfortable or inappropriate are replaced, and instead liberation and curiosity are promoted. Our country likes to place sexual health in a different category than dental or vision health, but France challenges us to view sexual health as no different than any other body part that we have to take care of and understand. We have to do better than just don't get pregnant. Our youth deserve more. They deserve skills-based, comprehensive, inclusive, and required sexual health education. Studies have consistently demonstrated the benefits of this type of education compared to abstinence-only or no sex ed at all. Our reproductive rights are under attack in this country, and it is past time for a change. Quality sex ed is happening around the world. Why not here? My trip to France taught me many lessons. First, this seemingly impossible change is already happening, and it's possible for our country too. Second, this change is worth fighting for. The type of sexual health education that we implement has significant impacts. It influences the quality of life of our youth, national health outcomes, our economy, and our social culture and values. This is not merely a women's health issue or a political debate. This is something that everyone should care about, and creating change will take all of us. What I shared today is not common knowledge. If it was, more people would be outraged. The first step of creating awareness is happening here today, and now we have to move towards action. While reproductive justice advocates like me are hard at work pushing for these policies, we need more people. At the national level, we have to vote and hold our policymakers accountable in advancing reproductive rights. However, change often starts at the local level. If you are a parent, go to your school districts and demand quality sexual health education for your children and their peers. If you are a student, go to your administrators, demand sex ed, and hold them accountable in providing it. I promise that your voice matters, and it is far more powerful than anything that I can say or tell them. In your communities, share what you have learned today. Spread awareness about the issue of our failing sexual health education system. Be upset, but organize for change together. It is time to move past viewing sex ed as optional or based on fear-mongering. We have to. Our youth's futures depend on it. I hope that each of you will join me in the reproductive rights movement to fight for skills-based, comprehensive, inclusive, and required sexual health education that empowers and prepares our youth to live fulfilled lives. Just don't get pregnant should not be the extent of our education. It should be the minimum. Thank you.